Do my intro here. You ready?
Sure.
We're gonna rock and roll.
Okay.
It's gonna be a good one. I can tell already. How you doing? This is another episode of T&T Weekly, and I'm here at the Gibson Center, and they have a wonderful event going on today. Don't get confused. I know it's Thursday. All right. We're taping on Thursday, and this will be released on Saturday, but they have a great Halloween event, and I think it's sold out as of this morning on Thursday. Irrelevant now when this is released, a few tickets. So I hope you picked up some tickets and bring out the family. They have time slots for their Halloween presentation here. It's going to be a lot of fun, all COVID friendly. And remember, without the arts and culture in our community, it's there's nothing there. We're sitting here nice and cozy. It's nice and warm. The fireplace is not on. And we're blessed to be in a warm environment. And speaking of warm environments, I'm very pleased to have on our show, T&T Weekly, Jenifer Pergentile, the executive director from Out of the Cold. And she obviously leads the push in our community to keep those in need out of the cold. I'm looking forward to this. It's going to be a great informative podcast. Jenifer, how you doing?
I'm good, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Oh, we're just awesomely blessed to have you here. Thank you for coming on the show. Jenifer, as I do with all our guests, I just would like you to, sort of bring our listeners up to date with your story.
My story.
And what brought you to Alliston,
Sure.
You and your family. I believe you live here?
Yes, I do.
Awesome. So just, who is Jenifer?
So I was born in Toronto, but raised in Tottenham from the 3 months old on. My family planted roots there. We lived there my entire life. So I grew up in the public school system in Tottenham and then came here to Banting. When I moved on to post-secondary, I moved away for a period of time. My husband and I spent some time in Alberta where I was working as an addictions counselor. And then after the birth of our second child, we moved back here, initially in Tottenham, but then planted our roots here in Alliston. And then had a third child. And it was around that same time that I was approached by the planning team for Alliston Out of the Cold and brought on board as a member of the planning team, particularly for consulting due to my addictions and shelter work background. And so I helped plan the program and plan what it would look like going into year one. Was involved obviously as a volunteer at that time, and then halfway through our first season, we realized that we needed somebody to sort of helm the ship, and the planning team hired me into that position. I was lucky enough and blessed enough to be offered that position, and so I've been in the role initially as program director, and now as the executive director. We're now an incorporated entity, and so I'm in that role right now.
Great. And Alliston Out of the Cold, it's we have a podcast going.
Oh.
Hi.
What are you guys doing here?
How you doing?
Hey.
Hi.
Hi, Dr. Myatt and Dr. Ramirez
Hi.
are in here.
Hello.
Come on,
Hello.
come on in here behind. Come on in
All
here
right.
behind. Holy moly!
We got wind of the podcast today,
Oh.
so we are stopping by to present you with a $500
Oh.
donation for
that's
Alliston
Whoa!
from the Professional Staff Association.
Thank
Wow.
you, gentlemen, so much. That is wonderful. Oh, I appreciate
Oh
that so
my
much.
goodness.
Thank you.
Anything we'd love to help. As president of the professional staff, we want to support a great program like you have. And again, it helps us in the emergency department because we have a lot of people that transient, especially in the winter time. And it's great that we have someplace that we can send them up.
Thank you so much.
No, thank you.
So
The
appreciate
physicians.
it.
This is Alliston New Tech. Look at this. Look at this. Incredible. This was not orchestrated. Okay. This was not orchestrated at all.
Okay.
However, Dr. Maya did reach out to me yesterday and said, "When are you taping?
Okay.
Because I would like to interrupt and I have a surprise."
Oh,
So here we are.
thank you. Both of you, thank you so
You
much.
guys are
welcome.
genuine. These are our doctors in our community,
Yes.
ladies and gents.
Yeah.
Just
We
awesome.
have an
Awesome.
incredible relationship with the hospital and
Good.
with your your staff.
We should just end the
We
show.
think,
eh?
yeah, great, it's done. We're
Let's
good.
go. We're done.
I doubt you're done.
No,
We're
no,
just
lots to
getting
talk
started.
about. We're just getting started.
Yeah.
and
Thanks for
everything.
letting us interrupt.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And,
well,
good
incredible.
luck.
You guys
Yeah,
are
very well.
incredible, man. You guys are incredible.
Oh.
Just really. Thank you so
There's
much.
punch.
Taps, taps.
Tap,
All right,
tap,
all right.
around.
All right, rock on. Rock
We're
on.
getting back to work now.
Yeah.
Okay,
Okay.
good. Good. Save some
Take
lives.
care.
Wow,
You guys take
incredible,
care.
incredible. You guys are the
Thanks.
best. Thank you for
Oh,
dropping
wow,
by.
wow, that's so amazing.
Oh man. Thank you guys.
Thank you.
Wow, isn't it?
What, you didn't orchestrate that?
I did not orchestrate it
Wow.
at all. I
That
did
was-
not. I did not. Dr. Myatt just texted me when he found out when I started
Okay.
promoting Out in the Cold. And if you did check out TNT Weekly, I did interview Dr. Myatt, Chief of Staff.
Yeah.
And I just recently interviewed Stevenson Hospital and the executive team. And he said, "Oh, when are you taping with Jenifer?" And I said, "This Thursday. I haven't got an exact time, around 1:30. Said, I don't want to be rude, but I have a surprise we'd like to come in and interrupt."
Oh,
And I figured it was something like
that's
that.
incredible.
But
That's-
again, isn't this,
Are we have
the best?
the best community. I really do have to say that.
I actually don't want to advertise it too much. Don't want it to turn into a city, right?
Well.
But this community rocks. The people in our community are so entwined, all our services
That's it.
and everything. So,
when
wow.
when my husband and I were making, we were living in Alberta, so when we were
Yeah.
making a decision to come back, my husband is not from this area, he's from Hamilton,
Yeah.
and so obviously we had a couple choices
Yeah.
to come back, and ultimately we landed on this area because we felt like this is the best possible place for us to plant roots with our family.
Wow. Well, not too often am I lost for words, but I don't know where we ended off. Where did we?
I don't even.
Where did we
I
end
don't
it off?
know.
Let me go
I was
to.
talking about being on the planning committee and
Oh yes, with Out of the Cold. Okay,
Yeah.
yes. So I know where we are now. Anyways, that was a beautiful interruption. Sorry for the interruption.
That's great.
So how did Out of the Cold as a nonprofit begin? Where did this all begin? This start and journey, and whom is responsible for this wonderful organization? Because I believe there are many locations and expanding, right?
Right. So, Alliston Out of the Cold is separate. So I'll talk about that in a second. But the
Yeah.
Out of the Cold concept, the concept of Out
Yes.
of the Cold, was born many years ago out of Toronto, and it was as a result of a death of a man on the street due to exposure, and a team of people put together. Essentially a spot where people could come and sleep for the night and be out of the cold, and it was run initially through some Catholic groups, and then it expanded, and traditionally, not always, but traditionally it has been operated by groups of churches that come together either to offer it in one location and then run by separate church groups, or as like a traveling shelter system that like for instance in Barrie for many years, over 20 years, there was Barrie Out of the Cold run in various churches throughout the downtown core
okay.
of
All
Barrie.
right. Okay.
And so we built off of that model initially in our first season, knowing that we wanted at least to have a space where people could come, be out of the cold, get a meal, and move on for the day. So overnight shelter, emergency overnight. Since then, Alliston Out of the Cold, the entity,
Yes.
has expanded in scope and in practice. And so while our name is still Alliston Out of the Cold, we are very much more than an Out of the Cold specifically program. In our second season, we expanded to include some staff for intake so that we could become more of a housing-focused shelter, which essentially means our goal is to move people out of homelessness as quickly as possible. So assist them in making the connections, so resources, services, etc., supports, all the things that they need in order to make a change to their circumstances as quickly as possible, rather than just being a place to come and sleep. And the idea, or I guess the shift, is an Out of the Cold program. You could use that for an entire season and make no strides towards housing, whereas what we're working on is part of the agreement in being in our spaces that you're working on moving forward. We want to make the experience of homelessness as short-term as possible, or move them on as quickly as possible, knowing that for some individuals that might mean assistance for, say, transitional or longer-term shelter in the meantime while they continue to make changes in their lives, or help to get to residential treatment or whatever. So what we say is that as a housing-focused programming, we are unrelentless in our pursuit to make homelessness as short-term as possible and help our participants move on to permanent and safe housing, or appropriate and safe housing alternatives.
Okay. And is that the reason for the seasonal options of Out of the Cold instead of making it a...
Yeah, so an Out of the Cold program, as traditional sense of the word, is for the winter months.
Yes.
And so we've continued to operate with the winter model.
Yes.
So we call ourselves now a housing focused short-term emergency group lodging shelter. Right now operating just throughout the winter months. But our goal as an organization, our 3 to 5 year plan is to move towards year-round shelter.
Okay.
Short-term shelter, but year-round offering, because we know that homelessness doesn't just exist in the winter months.
That's
we
right.
are well aware of that.
Yes.
And then after our second season, into our second season, we expanded to include a dinner. During our second season, it was still part of the shelter, but open to anybody in need of a warm meal. Into our third season, we actually made that into its own entity. So now it's its own separate program. We have volunteers who help make meals and serve the meals, and it's open to anybody in need of a warm meal. So you don't have to be experiencing homelessness to come through the door, and we don't have any qualifiers. So if you walked in the door and said you needed a meal, then you got a meal. I don't ask you to show me your income or prove that you need that meal. And then new to this season, or new to this year for 2020, we've just recently launched an outreach program.
I did see that, yep.
Yeah, and this was something that we had in our planning for like a soft launch in the spring. We've been talking about that since last year, 2019. COVID hit, things changed, we pivoted, and began operating a motel shelter through the generous funds provided, funneled from the federal and provincial government through the county and then to us.
So if I may interrupt, because
sure.
I was going to ask that, your experience with, here we are moving along, life is rolling, and then boom.
COVID.
Yeah, COVID hit. So
Yeah.
how did you transition? Obviously a dire impact in many different facets, and we'll continue that discussion, but go ahead, continue. How did it affect your organization?
So when it initially hit in March, I guess is probably when it really blew up for everybody. One of the things that we unfortunately had to do was close down our community dinner, just because we couldn't prevent the spread. We didn't have protocols in place at the time. So the dinner did shut down immediately. And as an aside, and I know you have my stats there in front of you, but season 2 we ran from November 1st until April 15th, those community dinners. And for season 3 we started again on November 1st, but shut down in the middle of March, and had well over 500 more participants or meals served already in March. Yeah. So it would have looked like double the amount of meals served
for that
from
year.
season 2 to season 3.
Yeah.
However, so that closed, and we initially moved to continuing to serve shelter to those who were already accessing us on a regular basis, because we could monitor their health symptoms.
Yes.
So anybody that was new to us, we worked to find alternatives for them. And at the time, my phone's ringing. We had the other shelters.
Yes.
I'll get there eventually.
Yeah.
The other shelters in the county had been moving into motel programming as early as sort of mid-March, but mostly into the beginning of April. And so we were able to utilize them as a referral source for the time being. In April, we then pivoted again and basically went on a lockdown of sorts, where we managed to dip into some funds that were set aside for our outreach initially, and keep our staff throughout the day, extend our volunteers who were still willing to stay with us into 24/7 coverage. We were housing initially 6 guests. Over some time, some of those moved on, and then we were able to take a couple more in. By the end of April, we were 4 guests housed 24/7. And then during that month, we worked hard to make a plan to move forward. And like I said, with the support of the county, we were able to open an interim shelter, essentially. Something that wouldn't have been operational otherwise, because we closed at the end of April. We opened a motel model program with that support from the county, and that operated from the beginning of May until September 1st.
And where was that?
Initially here in Alliston, but we ended up moving to Angus for the duration of that time. And so the I guess the hardship as far as being in Angus was that we were operating in a community that was, for all intents and purposes, really isolated from New Tecumseth, in that we don't have transportation. Public transportation doesn't exist here in South Simcoe. And so people who call New Tecumseth their home, particularly Alliston or really anywhere in New Tecumseth, they were staying with us and feeling like they were disconnected from their supports, from their doctors, from their methadone, from their family, from any number of things. And so we really saw a decline in our service to our actual community. And predominantly we were serving people from other parts of the county. So one of the big decisions that we were faced with near the end of August was we were about to head out of the summer and lose a lot of our summer staff because they were students. And so we were down. We had no staff going into September, and it would have meant rehiring and retraining an entire new program. And just with the knowledge that we didn't feel like we were adequately serving New Tecumseth, we felt like it was time to close that programming up. Not an easy decision at all, but come back to our community and focus on the launch of the outreach program. And so that's what we did. Our team had been kind of working on the planning throughout the summer, January, July, and August. And in September, we launched unofficially, our outreach program, and have been serving New Tecumseth and the surrounding areas in that capacity since September. And we're seeing that grow exponentially. In fact, my outreach worker just texted me last night and said this is the busiest week we've had yet.
Wow. Can you explain to us what an outreach program does? So I'm envisioning out of the cold on Paris, the home, the dwelling, and the stays and the meals, but what does the outreach program do?
So the outreach program is a mobile team of, we have an outreach worker, so paid staff, and then we have volunteers who go out within the community. So I should back that up. So there is a part of the day where the outreach worker is physically in our space, and people can come and take a shower, use the washroom, that kind of stuff, because there's not a lot of spaces that are allowing people to do that.
They're setting everything up for Halloween. That's what we're doing. So we're gonna get through a bit of that noise, but
and people are able to get supplies from him there. But then outside of that, a mobile team essentially out in the community. We've established some regular stops throughout New Tecumseth and Tottenham, working on establishing something in Beaton, a couple in Angus, and one in Angus and a couple in Alliston. Where they physically stop and we'll be there for a period of time for people to come to meet with them. And then they also take calls. So we operate on self-referral only. So if you identify a need, you would call and say, I'm struggling with whatever. And so one of the, I guess I should say that this isn't just for people experiencing homelessness. It's the program is aimed at servicing anybody who is experiencing or at risk of homelessness and or food insecurity. And food insecurity is a really big thing also in our community that's on the rise, and very little known about that in our community as well. But what we know to be true is that there are 2 ways that we can prevent homelessness: housing and prevention. And so this outreach program is really aimed at preventing homelessness getting to the people who need the services or need the supports, providing them with supplies that you know, they may be allotting that money to supplies and not being able to pay their rent or what have you.
Yes.
To assist them in making a shift in their circumstances before they are in an emergency and actually need shelter and are then experiencing homelessness.
Mm-hmm.
So we have on board and in the space, we have clothing, food. We have a great relationship with our food banks who are helping to provide food for that program. We have seasonal supplies, like winter gear, in the summer, you know, umbrellas and rain gear and
Yes.
sunscreen, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Personal hygiene items, and then we also have harm reduction supplies as well. And so they're out and they're connecting with people where they're at, what they need, and making connections, and then seeking essentially to, you know, with those connections, connect people to the resources or the services or the supports that they need in order to ensure that they don't end up in crisis and need to seek emergency shelter.
And where would be sort of the communication for someone in a homeless transition that does not have a cell phone or does not? How would they
Know about it or
know
come?
about your outreach?
Yeah. So my outreach team has been really great. My outreach worker has been really great about communicating our programming to all of the service agencies. Has been throughout the downtown core and the businesses in the area, letting people
Making
know
them
of our
aware.
services. Yeah, so we've got lots of business cards out there in the community.
Good.
All of the major social services within our immediate vicinity, within New Tecumseh, are aware that we exist and know how to get people connected to us. Like I said, we are self-referral, so an agency might assist them in making the call, but it ultimately needs to be the individual doing that. It's basically word of mouth for somebody in that type of position.
Situation,
But we're on social media and you know, we try to get it out there as much as possible. We've been slowly trickling it out, you know, with the newspaper and whatnot.
Let's get into funding.
Sure.
And I know that the COVID situation has affected a lot of wonderful, wonderful services and charities, and everybody's fighting and evolving.
Yeah.
But let's just speak about Alliston Out of the Cold. And I did see an article on, you know, a request to our local government on the required funding and the urgency on getting topped up to be able to serve this problem in our community. And I know I don't want to turn this into please give. We all have to give, but I know we're in this crazy COVID world of we're not knowing tomorrow and what's going to happen, so much anxiety and uncertainty. But I know for your organization, the plight must be mountainous. I just could not fathom what you're going through to keep everything going, because traditionally all your avenues of funding, at least from the community point of view, and events that you can have are kind of gone, right? So you've only got one. So tell us first, where does funding evolve? Is funding fully from the government and percentages? How does funding work for your operations, or is it all?
So we have traditionally, up until we received funding from the county to operate our motel shelter, up until that point, we have been exclusively funded by the generosity of our community and private donations.
Way.
Yeah.
Exclusively everything, every dollar.
Almost entirely. We have received some funds within our first year. We got some funds from the town council.
Yes.
But other than that,
it's all community supported.
Yeah.
Wow, I did not know that.
Yeah, we have been blessed with an incredibly generous community, and even in light of COVID, you know, donations are still coming in and surprising us all the time.
Look,
you know, in the month of October, we were talking about our outreach program, and as I mentioned, we had dipped into funds that we had set aside to launch that programming when we pivoted initially and were operating within our shelter in April. and so funds from that had been depleted. And so talking about operating the outreach program, we were not sure how that would go for the rest of the season. And it's been really quite incredible every time we've just spoken a need out loud to the universe.
Wow.
It's within a week we had money coming that would sustain us to the next month or to beyond that. And so
I'm taken back, Jenifer, because I'm already so overwhelmed and impressed by this beautiful community that I'm blessed to live in. And here's another reason. I did not know that. Honestly, I thought there was a funnel of annual monies budgeted in some level of government.
No, not yet. Not for us. There is the other shelters in the county have that, and they are, I shouldn't say every single shelter, but most shelters within the county have some form of assistance, whether it be municipal, like a budget
county,
line,
whatever, right?
Yes.
Provincial, whatever it may be, right?
Most of them have some funding in some way, funding sources, up until March, up until April, I guess, as I said.
Wow.
We had nothing. So it is something that, I mean, as you can imagine, as you grow as an organization, you have a greater need. So it is something that we are now having to pursue. I mentioned already that we had expanded in our second season to include intake workers, and so those were paid staff.
Yep.
So up until that point, I was the only paid staff member.
And everybody else was volunteer.
And everybody else, right from board to our volunteer scheduling to our meal scheduling, meal makers, meal servers, like shelter workers, fully voluntary.
Wow.
And then, as I said, we moved to hiring our intake staff in our second season, and again last season we operated so seasonally with 3 employees, all of which considered part-time, myself included.
Yes.
And then this season, like I said, we've spoken the need out loud, and provisions have come. If you're a believer, honestly, I've said I've spoken the need out loud, and God has provided in every turn for me. So we have decided, the board has decided to move forward, and this is also in light of COVID, and again due to low numbers in volunteering. We are expanding the hours of our intake workers to cover some hours for that community dinner and to do some more poignant interactions with our community dinner participants. And we are hiring overnight staff, and so we've reduced our need for volunteers from 7 per night.
Yes.
For our shelter program,
Yep.
from 7 to 3.
Wow, and another thing that has come to light. Look at I just did not realize the impact your services have in other medical care established. I wasn't connecting it. That's how ignorant I am. I wasn't connecting it, but you see, our doctors realize it, right?
Yeah.
The need in what you do.
Honestly, that is so quite, like, it's just so amazing because shelter providers, we're sort of a tight-knit group of people here in the county, and I think throughout the country you'd see that, but for a really long time, shelter providers have been saying that homelessness is not just a social services issue, it's really a health crisis as well. It really and truly is a health crisis as well. So it's really so great to see that they are supportive and on board. We don't operate in a silo. We do our best to make partnerships within this community. We never want to duplicate a service. We work in partnership with Contact Community Services and the Craftsman Center and
Salvation
Youth
Army,
Haven, and we talk to Salvation Army's out of Barrie, but we have connection to them, and the food banks, and we've got doctors who are willing to see patients without necessarily being their patient, and we've got pharmacies who are willing to assist people with getting naloxone kits, and we've got this community is pretty incredible.
Wow. Wow. It's blowing me away. It's blowing me away. And we spoke a little bit before the interview. I'm going to talk about something because it's honest. It's from my heart, and it's not that I don't have empathy in my life, but I just want to talk real.
Yeah.
This is because I've said this many times at the dinner table. I've said this over a glass of wine. I've said that in passing with friends and colleagues, even my wife, and you know, I have been guilty of saying when I see someone homeless that, well, you know, they should just go and maybe just get a job, you know, or work, you know, somewhere. And I've thought about it, what I'm saying, and I've tried to put myself in that position. I've tried to tell myself, well, if I had nothing, if everything just disappeared and I just had a suitcase and I walked out, you know, what would I do to eat, and what would I do? I talk that way to myself and trying to understand that.
That is empathy in its truest form.
Well, yeah. And now, you know, maybe, I mean, it's only been the last 2 years. I maybe wisdom, maybe age. I know that I'm ignorant in the sense of how can I make that assessment of someone in that position without truly ever understanding what position they're in. I have family, God bless, that I can go to. I have friends, I have colleagues that the state of mind, I know that I will have support. So who am I to look at someone, which I have.
Right.
I have, Jennifer.
Okay.
All right? And I know some of you have. Okay? And look at someone and say, man, just go get a job, like just go work or something, and all your problems will be solved. I have said that to myself, right? And I'm ignorant for saying that, right? There's no way I will ever understand, no way that I will understand the plight of some of these souls that are, and again, I please just explain to me, they're trapped. I know mental illness, it can be very evasive and change your life dramatically, and addiction and things like that. But please just help me understand what these loving souls are going through.
Sure.
Right? And how they get in this position, please.
Well, so the reality, I'm going to start from the beginning.
Yeah.
So, some of the stats that I have are older, just because we haven't had newer stats brought forward, but the vacancy rate in our community is 4%. In order to afford a one-bedroom apartment in New Tecumseh on minimum wage, you're spending well above half of your income on lodging. So the definition of affordable housing is spending less than 30% of your gross income before taxes on housing. And that's, unfortunately, in our community, it's just really not a reality. We have so many people living right on that edge of housed and unhoused. And so, like you said, there is that addiction and mental health aspect, but it's not always the reason that somebody ends up in the position that they end up. And the reality is, in our community, when someone ends up in a position where they are now unhoused, they are experiencing homelessness, there's really few and far between options to move forward in an affordable, accessible way, without supports, sometimes without deciding to move somewhere else. We have subsidized housing within the county. An individual can apply to receive assistance in their lodging. That's what that means. The wait list several years ago, so we know that it's probably longer at this point, was 5 to 7 years to be able to get that assistance.
Wow.
So, but what do you do in the meantime? Right? I don't have the answer. What do you do in the meantime when you're waiting to have assistance to even be able to afford something? And so what's happened is, and I know this to be true because I have a friend who actually went through this. It got to the point where she was told, if you choose to accept assistance in any community within the county, you'll be housed quicker. But if you want to stay here, where your family and your supports and your services and your children's schooling and their connections are, you could be waiting 5 to 7 years. And in the meantime, you know, you're living with family, or you're couch surfing, or you know, God forbid, you're living out of your car, or you're living rough, which means tenting. And the reality is that in all of Canada, not just in rural areas, homelessness, you know, the visible homelessness, that stereotyped stigma homelessness, you know, that panhandling, sleeping on grates, sleeping in the vestibules, that kind of stuff, the stuff that we see, that really only accounts for about 20% of the experience of homelessness. 80% of homelessness is hidden. So it's that couch surfing, it's the living in your car, the living rough. It's not visible to us. And here in New Tecumseth, it seems to be a new thing, but it's really only becoming that visible type of homelessness in the recent years. It's existed for many, many years, and it's really unfortunate. There's not a lot of affordable housing options in our area, in all of Simcoe County, as far as I'm concerned.
You told me something so interesting before we started taping, again, that I did not know and was aware of, that in the plight of homelessness, that many are people that live in our community. I'm stupid. I know. I just assumed that the plight of homeless in our community was simply mostly from transient individuals coming in and out, and no idea that it's actually people in our community that are having difficult times, as you were saying, and are forced into that situation and want to stay in our community. Totally, no idea that about that, Jenifer.
85% of our users in our shelter last season call New Tecumseth or South Simcoe, which is the area of New Tecumseth, Bradford, Innisfil, Essa, Ashtos, calls the area home.
85%. 85%. And as you were just noting before I cut in there, it's not the typical stereotype stigma type homeless, right?
It's what we don't see.
It's what we don't see, right? So
for every person that you think is homeless, I joke when I do training with our volunteers. It's maybe in bad taste, but I sometimes joke and say there are times that I feel like I look more homeless than some of our users. I don't think that I could pinpoint one of my participants as homeless, or what you would say looks homeless. You know, if I'm hanging out in my sweats and my hair is a mess, even on my best of days, I think that sometimes I could be considered homeless. You know, our participants.
So I've stereotyped this with the images of that small demographic.
Yeah, you know what you see on the streets of Toronto and what you see on the streets of Barrie. That's what most people believe is homelessness, and there's a culture of fear around that as well, right? It's the fear of the unknown. I remember as a kid, my father was a Toronto police officer my entire life, and so I knew a lot of things that maybe most kids didn't know, and I knew that Toronto was an unsafe place. And I remember, you know, we would cross to the other side of the street, or you know, do you have money? No, sorry. It was something that we were not necessarily taught to fear, but there was a culture of fear behind that. And so when we start talking about homelessness in a community like ours, where, you know, it's not visible, it's not something that we're seeing every day, there is no visible homelessness, you know, save for the few people maybe that people are well aware or experiencing the homelessness in our community. You know, that fear that's behind that is really hard to get beyond. The us and them mentality is huge.
So it's a big paintbrush of stigma.
Yeah.
It's a big paintbrush of stigma.
And I can tell you this, that if you talk to any one of our regular volunteers, you know, the people that are with us year after year, I think that you would be hard pressed to find a single one of them who would say, you know, my idea of what homelessness was then and now is so vastly different. It's changed so incredibly much because
Well, you've changed you've changed
Good,
my look at
Yeah.
it. It's just
it's no longer an us and them situation. It's really a we situation, and that's what I hope and I pray for in our community is, and really it's been already happening. We have like I said, such a gracious, generous community, but there's still those prevailing myths and sort of sentiments, and again that fear that's still there. So I hope and I pray that our community sees this as an us problem, something that we are all capable of changing and affecting change for. Like I said earlier, there are two ways to change homelessness: housing and prevention, not shelters. And so I would love for us to work ourselves out of a job. I really would.
yeah.
We need housing that's affordable, and we need real and tangible and sustainable and a huge movement of prevention in order to ensure that homelessness is a thing of the past.
Wow. So I'm thinking I could be walking past someone.
Yeah.
And that stigma of look and appearance, forget about it.
Yeah.
Like it's affecting more
Yeah.
of the unknown
That's
stigma, right?
That's right.
Of the hidden.
Yeah.
Obviously because of pride. Obviously
Huge. Yeah.
because of pride and
Well,
not being-
I invite your users or your watchers
Yeah.
to viewers, whatever you want to call them.
Yeah.
Think about if you ended up in a situation, and this is what we tell all of our volunteers. I mean, the real empathy in its truest form is understanding that you have no idea how you would react in that situation.
Oh, yeah.
And so really just understanding that it could happen to anybody at any time, and it doesn't have a face, and it doesn't have a look, and it doesn't have homelessness doesn't pick and choose. It's a bunch of circumstances that occur that land somebody in a situation where they are either faced with being very humble, swallowing their pride, and seeking assistance, but we're not wired in that way. As human beings, we're not wired in that way. So it takes a lot
to go there
to get to the point where you're walking through the door of our shelter, or you're calling our outreach program. When people are at their end when they're seeking us. So we have people coming to us in crisis, in the midst of trauma, and they're not at their best when they walk through the door. And our goal is to show them love, show them that this is a place to be safe and feel comfortable, in order to then help them move forward in that situation. Get them in, get them comfortable, and then, okay, now what's next? You have a place to sleep tonight, so now what's next?
Yeah, and show them that this community loves them and wants them to
Yeah.
stay here, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, you'll work it out. We'll bridge you over.
That's right.
We'll get through this, right?
Yeah.
That sort of confidence builder, right?
Our shelter, other than there is one shelter, another shelter here in Alliston. It's my sister's place, which is a violence against women shelter. So it has a specific mandate, serves a specific population of people. Other than them, there is no other shelter in all of South Simcoe. And I don't know if you're aware of this, but South Simcoe is probably the largest geographical area of Simcoe County, and no shelter system other than us at this point that exists to house people who are experiencing homelessness.
Yeah.
So prior to our inception, or our first year, which was November of 2017.
They're very young. It's
It
hasn't been here
there was
very
no
many
shelter
years.
before us, though. There was nothing. So
But homelessness
was here.
was here.
Yes. So anybody experiencing homelessness prior to us opening our doors, they had to leave. They had to move to Barrie, to Midland, to Aurelia, to Orangeville, to Newmarket, wherever where there was a service that would serve them. Because the reality is, particularly if you're living chronically homeless, this doesn't serve you any good to be here. And people that are living, there's a difference between episodically homeless and chronically homeless. I don't think we have all day.
Yeah.
Episodic is it's sometimes it's short term and it happens in fits and spurts. Chronically is longer term.
And is the chronicle tied to health issues and underlying health issues, mental illness?
Typically, yes.
Yes.
Typically.
Okay.
So the people who we would deem as chronic homeless, Within our community, those are the ones that tend to be a little bit more visible because they're the ones that are getting calls. The police are, constantly coming to having to trespass them or move them forward, and they're a little bit more visible. Episodic homelessness is much more prevalent in our area, and really ultimately it's the thing that we aim to mostly prevent.
Yeah, and all supported by our community again. Wow,
Yeah.
all the dollars supported by our community.
Yeah.
Jennifer, it's been amazing. You really woken me up here a bit. I wanted to have your service on the podcast. I wanted you to be able to talk about it to our community. And I hope you have learned a lot today on the plight of the homeless in our community and what our community does to keep them out of the cold. I totally thought this was a government-funded program.
No. Not yet.
I'm blown away. Like, this is just all supported by our community. That is incredible. That's incredible.
Yeah.
Right?
And we have the county to thank for our motel program over the summer, and now we've got a great relationship working with them, and they are moving to help support us throughout the winter as well, and are willing to consider us annually for funding as well. So COVID has opened doors for us.
Yeah, it's good. You have to take it that way.
At this moment, up until now, we've been exclusively private donations.
And tell me something, and maybe our listeners might be thinking once this podcast goes out on Saturday, what can anybody do? Obviously, I know financial contribution, yes, but let's say my son grows out of clothing, so and so, cans of food that you no longer, or you just want to put something aside. Is there something we can do in this post-COVID world right now that could help you and your organization?
Yeah, so like I said, we try not to duplicate too many services, so we don't tend to keep a lot of physically tangible donations on site, just because obviously we also don't have a lot of space. If you've seen our building, it's really not that big. So we source out for stuff like that. So we have an incredible agreement with the Clothesline through Contact, where our individuals who access us can go and shop there to get what they need. The food bank, again, we have an agreement with them. They help support us. So supporting those organizations peripherally who help support us is one way of being supportive. At this point, it's difficult for us to accept physical donations also, just because we're in a COVID world.
Thing, right?
So gift certificates to grocery stores is helpful, helps us stock our pantry because one thing I didn't mention is that people can come for the meal at night, but we also provide breakfast in the morning and a bagged lunch to every participant. So helping us to stock our fridge and our pantry is helpful through gift certificates is one way to do that. Monetary donations are always lovely. Volunteering your time right now, we've been a huge push for our shelter volunteers, and we feel like we've maybe gotten a handle on that for this season, but right now we also need people to help serve our meals, the community dinner. So
and if someone wanted to help you, Jenifer, is that like what is that? If you only had 2 hours?
Sure.
I only have 2 hours, but I would love to help you. What can I do? Do you have that sort of volunteer shifts? And
so I would suggest, if anybody wants to know more about volunteering, that they head to our website, which is www.allistonoutofthecold.com. If you head to the volunteer tab, all of the information on the different ways that you can volunteer with the organization is in there. With the community dinner, specifically what I'm speaking about, it's a 2.5-hour shift from 5 to 7:30. It's teams of people, so we're looking not just for single volunteers, we're looking for groups of people to come together. You would you would be the team captain, and you'd have a team of say 3 to 10 people, and in rotations you would come once a month on your day to serve in teams of 3. So we're looking for groups of people to come and serve meals. And that is for our community dinner, we do allow youth to also assist in that. In our shelter program, you must be over the age of 18. That's how you can get involved with volunteering. And I would suggest, to know more, go to our website and hopefully that can help, or even send us an email.
Jenifer, just an amazing service what you're doing here. It's an amazing program. I've learned a lot today.
Thank you.
And you know, it's really helped me, my heart. You know,
Good.
anything. The stage is all yours. You can end the show. Anything that I missed
Sure.
in this program that you offer and programs that you offer,
Yeah.
please, the stage is yours if you have any last words.
I actually just want to take this opportunity to thank each and every one of you in the community for your time, for your passion, for your generosity. Like I said, we really do live in such an incredible community, and we honestly, we would not exist without our community. So thank you, thank you, thank you.
All right. All right. I said it from day one. New Tech rocks. It rocks 100%. All right. Have a safe Halloween. And remember, share the love out there. It's not all that stigma and paintbrush that I'm guilty of doing. I know some of you might be in that same position too. I mean, homelessness is unknown, hidden, different situations. And what I really love about this is the community has funded this entire program. They're doing this with the love of our community. So I know the love is out there. Thank you for sharing with us,
Thank
Jenifer.
you for having me.
Hey,
Thank you.
no problem at all. Okay, rock on, over and out. New Tech rocks. Okay, we'll see you again. Bye-bye.
Take care.
Bye-bye. Jen, that's it. Rock and roll.
Wow. Oh, good.